So, to help us set up the trading day, we welcome in Kevin Hincks now, who is the co-host of Fast Market, live from the CBOE. Very good morning to you, Kevin. Hope you had a great weekend. Let's start with the tariff headlines, because it seemed like we were taking a bit of breather, but this very much back in the minds of investors this morning, particularly as we've now got some slightly confusing news coming out from the White House, particularly as far as when those tariffs actually might come into effect, or more so when the deals will be done. We've got commentary around letters being sent out as well. So the goalposts now shifting. How are you looking at all of this?
Good morning, Sam. Yes, I think, coming off the holiday weekend, don't have a lot of economic data, very light on earnings. Delta Airlines is the one high-profile name. It's all about headlines, and it's all about Wednesday's date for letters to be sent or deals to be done. Scott Bessent was already on television this morning doing interviews talking about several announcements coming in the next 48 hours. Besides that, letters will be sent out to countries informing them of their tariff rates and the effective date. And this is important because there's a subtle difference here. August 1st was when these would all go into effect. So it wouldn't be immediate, but the letters would go out July 7th unless a deal is made. But Scott Bessent was pretty positive about that several announcements will be made in the next 48 hours. So, this is going to be one of those weeks without a lot of data, without a lot of earnings. We're in that chasm where the earnings have stopped, and before they start again, when we get JP Morgan on the 15th, it'll just be a scattering of earnings. But headlines that have driven this market really for the last quarter, right? Since the beginning of the second quarter, it's been all about headlines, and headlines will drive trading this week. You're already seeing it, right? Headlines are driving the NASDAQ and S&P lower with Tesla's headlines this morning. So there are headlines out there, and there are more coming from the White House. Just you gotta keep your eyes peeled and keep your head on a swivel, because they could come quickly, as you know.
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, the big question was, what does this actually mean as far as shifting those goalposts? Did it mean that the US wasn't sort of far along enough with some of those deals? Were they trying to sort of buy more time here? And I think Bessent, as you say in the commentary this morning, seemed to sort of suggest that they do need to hammer out some more negotiations here. But one thing that is certainly higher this morning off the back of some of this tariff uncertainty, and perhaps a bit of a demand for the safety trade, is the dollar. And of course, we've also had Trump taking aim at the BRICS. It's not the first time, obviously. We did hear this earlier this year, particularly because of this whole sort of narrative of de-dollarization as well. What are your thoughts on this one, Kev?
Yeah, the BRICS is interesting. Remember, and for those that don't know, it's Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. That's who makes up the BRICS. And they had a meeting where they came out with a unilateral statement talking about serious concerns over unilateral tariffs. And when President Trump saw that, he reacted by saying that any country that comes out with anti-American statements will face another 10% tariffs. So now that's rhetoric. We'll see if that actually enters into any hard trade agreements, but President Trump certainly will react to anti-American, statements coming from a group like this. So even though Xi Jinping skipped this meeting, it had taken place in Brazil, they made a unilateral comment about unilateral tariffs, and President Trump reacted to that. So more rhetoric there, more back and forth. I think that is a secondary story to what we're seeing with the overall individual trade deals. That's what the markets are going to want to see, Sam. They're going to want to see those announcements like we saw from the UK, like we saw from other countries. We want to see those come to forefront. We want to see ceremonies in the White House where they're signing trade deals on paper. That's what the markets are looking for here. Right now, so far this morning, as we approach that deadline, and some of the history is, if they feel that they have good negotiations going, Could President Trump extend some of those beyond July 9th? Yeah, that's what you're watching for, right? That would be another good set of news that the markets will come off the brinksmanship of Wednesday. So that's what you're watching for. You're watching for any deviation in movement towards a trade deal, extension based on good news, and the opposite that might happen if there is no good news. Hard letters going out with new tariffs. So the markets are watching for a lot. Not, like I said, not a big week for earnings or data, but a big week for headlines potentially.
Oh, for sure. And obviously with those letters, we want to see who's going to receive them and what they're going to say. That's the big question on everyone's minds too. You mentioned some of those deals. Obviously, we saw one getting across the line with Vietnam as well. There has been some suggestion, Besant talking this morning about potentially meeting his Chinese counterpart in the next few weeks as well. You've got Trump signaling that perhaps we might have some conversations around TikTok. That's been a big part of the puzzle as well. But let's shift to the macro, Kevin. Obviously, we've got the Fed minutes released on Wednesday. We had some data out the back end of last week, and I suppose sort of flew under the radar somewhat because everybody was rushing off on their holiday weekend, trying to get out early. But no doubt some of the commentary that I've been seeing around this is that this perhaps justifies the Fed to be able to sit on their hands this month as far as that jobs report.
Well, one thing, I thought Thursday's jobs report was a solid number. And though some of the percentages for a rate cut went down, it really shouldn't have, because the inflation data in terms of month-over-month wages and year-over-year was much better than expected. So more good news on inflation that we got. So, but that being said, I believe that where the CME FedWatch tool is right, with almost no chance of a July rate cut, what you're hoping for is that July Fed meeting where they guide towards the September meeting. Remember, in the middle of summer, there's no August meeting. So after July, the next meeting will be September. That's what you're looking for. Right now, the odds of a rate cut in September, as it starts out this morning, pre-market, 66.2% for a September rate cut. For July, 4.7%. So virtually no chance of a July rate cut. But what I expect is for Jerome Powell, who doesn't like to surprise the markets, to start guiding towards a September rate cut. And that's how you get to two by the end of the year. One in September, one at the back half of the year. I think that's what the market is probably looking for. July, probably a little too quick, not going to happen there. The percentages say that. But September is where I think the focus will be, Sam.
Great stuff as always. Kevin Hincks, thank you so much. We'll check in with you a little bit later.